Welcome to our second video on Chapter 6 Economic Systems. This one's about solving scarcity. We'll see you inside the video. So we're going to start with this slide. Some of the classes have already done this one, but if you've not yet, I want you to write this question down and write out some possible answers for what you think. Just jot them down right there in your notes as you're writing it. As you're doing this, think about what situations are we talking about where people's wants and needs are not being met. This could be healthcare. This could be medicine. This could be housing. Could be jobs. All kinds of things. So think about those for a second, and we'll get started by you writing that question down and write some possible answers. You can pause the video for a moment until you're done, and then in a minute or so, go to the next slide. Okay, we're going to be looking at three things that create scarcity next. The three things are going to be land, labor, and capital. We're going to start with a thing called land. Land consists of all material found in the natural environment, which are renewable and non-renewable resources: trees, fruit, gold, oil. I'm going to add to this air and wind, water. You could even possibly say sun. So land is all those things: renewable, non-renewable resources, the things that create the materials for us to be able to make products. That's land. That's the first thing that creates scarcity. Sometimes we don't have enough land. We don't have enough of these things. We don't have enough oil for what we want to do. Or maybe we're talking about like physical land. Whatever it is, land is one of the things that possibly creates scarcity in our analysis of what to do to solve scarcity. Now, this field of hay here that you're seeing, there's a question about it. It says, what impacts might this decision about using the land have on the land? So this field of hay. So what it means basically is you're going to put a quick answer down as this field of hay, they decided to use it to grow hay on. It wasn't always this way. At first it was something else. Perhaps it was prairie land that they cleared, and then they decided, let's grow hay on it. But they could have done other things. They could have put a parking lot here. They could have put a city. They could have put a swimming pool. They could have left it alone and done nothing. They could have grown forests here. There's all kinds of things that they could have done with the land. But we decided to use the land for growing hay. What impacts, what consequences, what results of growing hay on this land might be? They could be positive or negative. So I'll put impacts, I'll put results or consequences. You're going to jot that down in your notes for a second, and I'll expect an answer from you to be able to have an idea of what some of those impacts are. Then you can pause the video for a second as people finish writing. The next thing that creates scarcity that we're going to take a look at today is labor. Labor is the physical and mental effort used to produce goods or services. Basically, the people that do the stuff. So these are farmers, waitstaff, drivers, teachers, mechanics, you name it. If they're people, they're doing the labor, they're doing the work. That's it. We could call it workforce. We could also call it labor force. So you'll hear it as workforce, labor force, just labor, all kinds of things. But those are the people to do it. We know that this creates scarcity because if we don't have enough people to fill the jobs that we need, that's an issue. We talked about this with the provincial nomination program. Remember that from last chapter. And trying to get people like nurses or farmers or oil workers here in Alberta. So the question here is, how do choices concerning jobs affect the workplace? So those choices concerning different types of jobs, like you see here, or right, nurses, oil workers. How do what we decide to have as jobs affect everything else? give a try at that one. You can pause the video for a second. The last thing that creates scarcity is going to be capital. Capital, for the most part, is going to be money. But sometimes it's materials that you, of course, would get with money. So if you have a farm and you got $1 million, that's not going to help you much. You're going to need to buy something. And so you could say a tractor might be capital. It's the thing you have to help you get the job done. So this is looking at producing a good or service. That's what capital is. What do I have to be able to get something done? Most of the time it's money. All right, so taking a look at the right, going back to land, labor, and capital, the land that we see is all this steel. It's physically the space they're in, right? There's all this metal and steel and stuff that they're using, plus all the materials for the plane. The labor is all the people hired to build the plane. So the capital would be the money used to hire the people, to build the things, to get the whole thing going. But what if all that money that we're investing into building a plane, what if that was invested in something else? Let's just, for the sake of argument, say this whole building plus planes, all that kind of stuff, let's just say it equals 1 billion, okay? That's a lot of dollars, 1 billion. What if that 1 billion was used instead of building the plane as something else? What if we invested that money into education or nursing or fixing the train or roads or snow removal or whatever it is? That's what this question's asking. What if we moved it somewhere else? How would that affect, how would that change things? Write down your answer for that. Okay, so those three things, land, labor, and capital, all help to cause scarcity. How do we solve it then? How do we figure out how to fix it? Economic systems are created to help solve that basic problem of scarcity. Different ideas that people have mean you're going to come up with different economic systems. The position is always dynamic. Dynamic means always changing. So sometimes you're going to have somebody who thinks that we should do this over on the right, but something changes and they might move left a little bit. They decide, oh, we changed our mind. We want to do it a little bit more government involvement. Or they go, oh, you know what? We want even less government involvement. We want to put it way over here. This is something, economic systems are never the same in a country. They're always changing, usually based on who's in power and what government is leading the country. We are going to take a look at the political continuum, and you'll notice that this thing in front of you here is very similar to the arrow that you would have drawn for the political continuum at the start of the year, left and right, stuff up on the board in front of class. So what you can do is draw this guy, this arrow, okay, on your paper. On the right, you've got less government involvement, and on the left, you've got more government involvement. In the middle, we've got Canada with what we're going to define as a mixed economy. On the right, we've got a market economy with the U.S. close to it. And on the left, we have a thing called a planned economy. I'm going to go through each one of these and define them for you, starting with planned economy. So you can wait to write it as we go through these things, or you can just write all this stuff up now. Here we go into planned economy. A planned economy means that there is more government involvement. In fact, a full planned economy is what we call communism. At this end of the spectrum, government makes all the decisions about how to solve scarcity. It owns the resources, it manages the resources, it plans what's going to be produced, and decides how to use those limited resources. Consumers don't really play any role in this. This would have been like in 1950 Russia or something like that. Okay? The government controls everything. So the characteristics here are that resources are publicly owned. I'm going to define publicly owned, and then I'm going to come back to the slides. So just chill for a second. Here's what publicly owned means. Publicly owned means it is owned and controlled by the government and paid for by your taxes. For instance, healthcare in Canada is publicly owned. Public just means the government runs it through our taxes. Okay? And in a planned economy, that's all that happens. Resources are publicly owned. The government makes the decisions on how to use those resources, and individual consumers have little influence on economic decision making. So in this case, in like 1950 Russia, they might make shoes. There's no private shoe company. You cannot go into business making shoes. The government makes shoes. The government makes cheese. The government makes bread. The government makes clothes. And maybe the only shoes available are white and black. And you're saying, oh, yeah, but I don't want white or black. I want purple. The government doesn't care what you think. It has decided it's going to have white and black shoes, and that's what there's going to be. Individual consumers have no influence or very little influence on what gets made. That's a planned economy. You need to know that to know what the next economy is that's coming up. Which is the opposite, a market economy. This we know of as capitalism, pure capitalism. At the end of this spectrum, and these are two ends of the spectrum, so they're very, very opposite. At this end, the choices of individuals only solve scarcity. Private businesses own and manage resources. They sell their products to consumers who make their own decisions about what to buy. Businesses succeed if they produce what consumers want. Otherwise, they fail. The government does not get involved. So with our shoe example, if a company makes black and white shoes and the people say, I want purple shoes, that company goes out of business. And some other company comes in that says, hey, we'll make purple shoes. That company gets all the money. The government doesn't step in. The government doesn't get involved in this. It's all private, regular old businesses owned by people who make all the decisions. The further right you go, the less government involvement there is. So the characteristics of this one are that resources are privately owned. The government doesn't own the land, the people own the land, or the people own the factory. Individuals make decisions on how to use resources, and individuals drive the economic decision-making by choosing what to buy. This is what we're used to. Things that people are interested in, they're going to make more of because they know they're going to be able to sell them. Things that people don't like, they quit selling. In my lifetime, they used to make like iPods, and they basically, as far as I know, they quit making iPods because people just don't buy them anymore, didn't need them. So they quit making them. That's going to be more of a market economy. You can pause the slide while I go into the last one. Oh, privately owned. Forgot to define that. Resources are privately owned and controlled by businesses and individuals. So like if your dad has a restaurant, it's privately owned. The government doesn't own the business. He owns it. That kind of a thing. Okay, last one. A mixed economy. This is going to be kind of what Canada is. And we needed to do this one last because a planned and a market economy on the left and the right combine to form a mixed economy because it is simply mixed. Mixed economy combines private ownership and government control. For example, Private businesses own some resources, and the government owns others. In mixed economies, the level of government involvement fluctuates depending on which political party is in power. So we've got, let's say, my favorite coffee shop in town is CH Cafeteria. It's owned and operated by some people from Mexico. They own it. That's it. They make decisions. But also in our economy, we have things that are controlled by the government. Sort of, we could say the postal service is like this. We can't be like, oh, we don't like this stamp, we're not going to buy it. Like, our decision about stamps or what the boxes look like don't play a role in them deciding what the boxes are going to be or how much they cost. They just make that decision because our individual consumer choices have no say in the postal service. And we've got a lot of businesses that are run by the government. We got a lot of businesses that, of course, are private. So we are called a mixed economy. Our characteristics: some resources are publicly owned, some are privately owned. Individuals and government both make decisions about what to produce. Individual consumers and government influence economic decision making. So in this one, right, the government helps decide how much oil is produced, but private companies decide to produce that oil. The government decides maybe how much things are going to cost when we trade with other countries, but individual companies are allowed to participate in that process and make the money. So we have a mixed economy where government and private business are always working with one another all the time. This is another way of looking at it. We will not write this down, except for two words I really like. Collectivism, meaning the idea that we should be a group all together. This is more on the left wing. Individualism, right? The individual gets to decide. That's going to be more on the right. If you want to write some of these down, you can, but you don't have to because you pretty much have all this already. Okay, we're going to start a new video in just a second. We're going to end on that last one, and we'll see you as the next video starts.